We were promised a horizon of gold. Hollywood gave us the noble cowboy, the sweeping vistas, and the thrill of the open trail. But the truth? The truth is buried under 6 inches of alkaline dust and the bones of those who never made it. Traveling the Old West wasn't an adventure. It was a slow, agonizing descent into survival horror. It wasn't about finding freedom. It was about trying not to die in the middle of nowhere, where the only thing cheaper than a bullet was a human life.
Welcome to Living History Channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one.
The coffin on wheels. Forget the cinematic images of a smooth ride across the plains. A stagecoach was quite literally a wooden box of misery. They called them Concord coaches, but for the passengers crammed inside, they were moving coffins. Imagine being trapped in a space no larger than a modern closet with 8 other strangers. You're sitting on a hard leather bench, shoulder to shoulder, for 22 hours a day. There is no air. There is only the suffocating stench of unwashed bodies, tobacco spit, and the constant blinding clouds of dust that turn your lungs into sandpaper. The roads weren't roads at all. They were jagged scars across the earth, filled with boulders and ruts deep enough to snap a limb. Every few seconds, the coach would lurch, slamming your head against the low ceiling. Sleep was a luxury that didn't exist. If you tried to close your eyes, the violent swaying would throw you into the person next to you. By day 3, your body didn't just ache, it felt like it was being systematically dismantled. And then there was the mud. When the storms hit, the trail turned into a swamp. Passengers were often forced to get out and push the massive 2-ton vehicle through waist-deep sludge. You paid for a ticket, yet you ended up doing the work of a pack animal. Exhaustion wasn't something you felt. It was something you wore, like a second skin. You were a prisoner of the trail, and the coach was your cell. But as the wheels groaned and the wood splintered, you'd realize that the physical discomfort was merely a distraction. The real danger wasn't the cramped interior. It was the world waiting just outside the door. The invisible killers. In the movies, the hero dies in a blaze of glory, a single bullet to the heart. In reality, the most common way to die in the Wild West was far more humiliating. It was invisible. It was the water you drank, the meat you ate, and the very air you breathed. Cholera was the king of the trail. It could take a healthy man at breakfast and have him in a shallow grave by sunset. It turned the body inside out, leaving travelers shriveled, blue, and screaming for a drop of water that their bodies couldn't hold. Dehydration was a constant shadow. Imagine walking 20 miles a day under a sun that feels like a physical weight. Your tongue swells until it fills your mouth. Your skin cracks and bleeds. You look at the horizon, praying for a river, only to find a dry bed of salt. Travelers would become so desperate they would drink the blood of their dying oxen or their own urine, just to survive another hour. Nature wasn't a backdrop. It was an active predator. During the day, the heat could melt the lead in your pockets. At night, the temperature would plummet below freezing, turning wet clothes into sheets of ice. An infected scratch from a thorn or a bite from a tick could turn into a gangrenous nightmare in days. There were no doctors, no medicine, just a rusted knife and a prayer. People didn't walk across the West. They crawled across a graveyard of their own making. And if nature didn't finish the job, the people hiding in its shadows certainly would. Bandits, ambushes, and fear. The silence of the trail was the most terrifying sound of all. It meant you were being watched. On the isolated stretches of the overland route, fear was a constant passenger. You knew the stories. You'd heard about Black Bart and the gangs that haunted the canyons. Every bend in the road, every narrow pass, felt like a trap waiting to spring. The ambush usually happened in a heartbeat. A downed tree across the trail, a sudden shout, and the cold realization that your life was now in the hands of a man with nothing to lose. These weren't the gentleman bandits of fiction. They were desperate, violent men who viewed a stagecoach as a treasure chest on wheels. If you were lucky, they only took your gold and your boots. If you weren't, they left no witnesses. This created a culture of paralyzing paranoia. Travelers slept with revolvers in their laps and one eye open. Every stranger met on the trail was a potential threat. Conversations were guarded. Names were often fake. You lived in a state of high alert that drained the soul. Armed escorts provided little comfort. They were often the first one shot. You realized very quickly that out here, there was no 911. There was no law. There was only the heavy weight of the iron in your holster and the hope that you were faster than the man in the mask. But even if you survived the violence, the land itself began to play tricks on your mind. The psychological horror. There is a specific kind of madness that comes from staring at nothing for 3 months. They called it prairie madness. The sheer, crushing scale of the American West was something the human mind wasn't designed to handle. Week after week, the landscape never changed. It was an ocean of grass or a sea of sand, stretching into infinity. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was a physical weight that pressed against your eardrums until you started hearing voices in the wind. Isolation did strange things to the psyche. Travelers would go days without speaking, the loneliness hollowing them out from the inside. You'd look at your family and see strangers. The emotional exhaustion was worse than the physical pain. You were sleep-deprived, malnourished, and living in a state of constant terror. Many broke. Men would wander off into the desert and never return. Women would sit in the back of a wagon and simply stop responding to the world around them. The hopelessness was infectious. You started to realize that the world you left behind, the cities, the schools, the safety, it didn't exist anymore. There was only the trail. The trail was the beginning and the end of the universe. And for many, the end came much sooner than they expected. The ones who never arrived. The roads of the Wild West weren't paved with stone. They were paved with dreams that died. If you walked the Oregon Trail in the 1850s, you were never more than 80 yards away from a grave. It's estimated that 1 out of every 10 people who set out for the West never arrived. They are the disappeared, the families who vanished into the mountains, the loners who were swallowed by the plains, the children whose names have been erased by a century of wind. Along the trails, you would see the litter of despair. Grand pianos, heirloom clocks, and chests of fine china discarded by the side of the road to lighten the load for dying oxen. These were the physical remnants of lives that were being stripped away piece by piece. But the most haunting sights were the shallow graves. Often, they were dug in the middle of the trail itself, so the wagons passing over them would pack the dirt down, preventing wolves from digging up the bodies. To die on the trail was to be forgotten. There was no time for a funeral, no time for mourning. You buried your brother, your wife, or your child, and you kept moving. If you stopped, you died too. The West didn't care about your grief. It didn't care about your plans. It was a vast, indifferent machine that ground human hope into dust. As the sun sets over the Sierra Nevada, you realize that the beauty of the landscape is a mask. Beneath it lies a graveyard that spans half a continent. The Wild West survives today as a beautiful myth, a story of rugged heroes and golden sunsets. But myths don't bleed. Myths don't starve. The reality was a nightmare of mud, disease, and the crushing weight of the unknown. We remember the ones who conquered the frontier, but the land belongs to the ones it broke. Because in the end, the West wasn't won by the brave. It was survived by the lucky.
Thanks for watching. If there's a forgotten era or photo you want me to bring to life, drop it in the comments. I'm listening.